Oh, yeah.
Okay, Hunter.
All right, I'm on?
Yep.
Sweet. Like here for the, do I just say hi, I'm Hunter, and that's great.
Saying it.
Yay,
See,
Hunter.
this is the weird part with being slightly recorded. So, hello everyone, I'm Hunter Stuckemeyer. I am full-time early childhood education faculty. We're talking about trauma today. As a disclaimer, we are talking about trauma, so sometimes that can bring up heavy things. We're going to try to keep it, I don't want to say we're going to try to keep it light and cheery, but we're going to put most of our focus today into how we use this with college students. So one of the things that sometimes college students, when they hear the word mindfulness, they're always like, ooh, no, I don't have time for that. But when you trick them into doing it in the first 5 minutes of the class, it makes it easier. So I'm going to trick you guys into doing it in the first 5 minutes of our session with what is hopefully a pretty easy activity. So each of you have a piece of paper, and if you didn't grab one, it's by the sign-in sheet. There's also markers and some colored pencils. So grab 2 or 3 colors and the marker. Jim, you're going way ahead of me. You're thinking in the right direction though. So first, I want you to take your marker. And before you start drawing, I want you to think about how it feels in your hand. What is the weight of it? How does it feel? Jim, you can grab a marker.
Oh.
I'm just giving you a hard time. I'm sorry. You can use a pencil if you want. I'm not going to discriminate.
I didn't see the marker.
So we're going to take about 2 minutes, and we're going to just draw as slowly as we can, thinking about how the pressure of the marker feels on the paper, thinking about, is it smooth, is it rough, and we're just going to let ourselves experience. If you have thoughts during this, I'm not someone who's like versed in meditation, but I invite you to either embrace your thoughts and think about them, or refocus yourself without judgment back onto drawing. So we're going to take about 2 minutes and just draw. Try not to lift your pen off the paper. That's the eraser. And just draw, just random. Like, nothing has to make sense. We're just looking for experience. And I'm going to turn on a little bit of music just so it isn't so quiet. Now, as we're finishing up this, try to find a place where your line can connect back in so it doesn't look like it just ends. All right, now for the next 3 minutes, take your colored pencils, whichever one you want, and start filling in some of the holes that you can find in it. So there'll be a lot of different shapes to fill in. Doesn't matter which color each one is. Just fill in different pieces of it. All right, I'm going to invite you to start wrapping up this because as much as I'd love to just sit and color all day, there are other things we're going to talk about. So as you're wrapping up, turn to the person next to you. And Jeff, you sat by yourself, so you're going to have to find someone to talk to, or you talk to yourself, up to you. Jim, wow. See, wow. Apparently I did it a little too well. I'm so sorry, Jim. I was looking at Jeff instead. But anyway, talk about a little bit how you felt while you were doing it. Did it help center you into this moment? Or feel like, oh, that was fun. So since we're recording, I'm not going to ask you to share it out loud because sometimes that can be weird. So, Jim, if you want to talk to someone or talk to yourself.
Oh, okay.
Since I combined you guys anyway.
Not worry about schedule for the day.
During phone calls, great, education. So, you know, I mean, pick up the mama and just like out there for nice, not even good rest. You work out the, yeah, me too. Yeah. I almost out of fish, but. Yeah. Should I just have fish? And me, I should. No, I'm fish. You did. You were a fish.
But I run my information to my CSO.
You feel like you were.
I like your colors, very nice. The blue and the green color is great together. Really, are you a blue? We love it. Yes. I like some blue colors, man.
And this is these two colors.
It was meant to be.
All right, not to put a damper on fun conversations, but if anyone wants to share, have you done this before? Have you done this with your students before? Or any just observations from doing it right now? Remember, we are being recorded though, so like, not gonna put you on the spot.
No, but I want to do it with students. And the one thing I noticed, I was talking to Jeff and he mentioned breathing, is I didn't breathe until 9/10 of the way through.
Yeah.
Wow, I haven't breathed yet. And then I took a couple deep breaths and it was really refreshing to take deep breaths a couple.
Yeah. Well, it's good for me guiding it now to remember to tell people to breathe. Yes.
So that is a good point, because a lot of times when we've got this stress, we do tend to hold our breath. I learned that from some counseling and therapy, but then also the mindfulness activity I want to do with my ESL class. I brought in the sheets the first night, but it was a little difficult, so we're going to try again this week. But even today, as you didn't breathe, the harder or the more firmly I held the marker, you know, we weren't going anywhere, and then it started to just, okay, let it go. Let it go. You know, you have more free form.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
I found it to be very relaxing. I did think it helped to center me a bit, and it was just good to go, and do something fun. For me, it took me back to probably the most special moments for me is being a child, being able to do, you know, free and creative things without any expectations.
That's the biggest thing, is as adults, there's so many expectations. And even though mindfulness is in its own category, it is technically a form of Jim's other favorite word, not AI. Play.
Play. Oh,
Play.
Oh, play.
Play.
Jim's other favorite word. Any other thoughts before I move on? Great, because I'm going to snag your stress thing and take it and run with it. So one of the things that causes trauma is ongoing toxic stress. And toxic stress is a stressor that doesn't just go away, right? It keeps going, it keeps permeating, and it affects so many people. Toxic stress can range from growing up in an abusive household to financial, what's the word I want? I don't want to say stress, thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, financial strain, racism, growing up as a member of the LGBTQ community. Any of these things can cause that toxic and ongoing stress. And that relates to a big form of trauma. So trauma isn't always like a one and done deal where it's one event that happens. It can be ongoing, and many of our students have this going on in their lives, whether or not we know it. Most people, by the time they come to college, will have at least one traumatic event that happened in their life, whether it's ongoing or a one-time thing. Before I keep going, does anyone know the definition just of the word trauma? Because I've been using it now and kind of bulldozing ahead without actually defining it. Any guesses?
Well, I've always thought that it's in the eye of the person who's experiencing it.
Yeah.
So trauma for one person it's not up to us to judge if it's traumatic for that person.
Yeah, that is very true. You're beating me to the punch. I was going to share that.
Oh,
That's okay. You look like you had a thought.
You know, just something that is, I don't, like very, I would say almost life-changing.
Mhm.
You know,
Yeah.
life-changing event
Mhm.
that,
Yeah.
that really, you know, affects a person.
Yeah. So, oh no, I'm sorry. Continue.
No,
Oh,
that was me.
okay.
So trauma is, so it's a, not a one-time event, like you said. It's ongoing. I think
So it can be
be
both.
a one
Yeah.
time, right? But then it's how we process it.
Yes. Yeah. So trauma is essentially emotional processing after. We talk about PTSD from people who come back from war, where they have post-traumatic stress disorder because they've experienced so many things that they are emotionally not as capable of processing. And so at the root of it, a lot of it comes down to an inability to emotionally reconcile that moment or that event or that ongoing part. Mindfulness, as a disclaimer, I'm going to talk about at the end, is one of the ways to help rebuild from it. But there are a lot of different components that go into that emotional inability to get back to where you were. There's this fun term called resiliency. Have you ever heard of emotional resiliency? Yeah, Jim? You want to elaborate a bit?
well, I mean, the same event, I usually apply it in development to children.
Yeah.
And the same event might affect even two siblings. One might be more resilient.
Yeah.
Same event might just bounce off them, and the other one would be like me, where I'm very easily freaked out.
Yeah.
Could be like that.
It's your ability to process the event emotionally in and of itself. Everyone does it a little bit differently. So I'll share my husband and I as an example. As a kid, you stub your toe all the time, right? It happens. Like an hour later, most kids are fine. I was fine an hour later, even though at the moment I thought I was going to die, right? Because stubbing your toe hurts a lot. You think you're going to die in the moment, especially when you're a kid. For me, that's what happened. An hour later, though, I was fine. Could I remember any of the specific times I stubbed my toe? No, I know it happened. My husband, on the other hand, one time stubbed his pinky toe so hard it split open and had to go to the hospital, right? I mean, his did get a little more escalated than all of my stubbing my toes did, so it's fair that he has that trauma from stubbing his toe, right? Whereas I could stub my toe any day now. He stubs his toe now as an adult, and still a little bit of his like a little bit of that still fear and panic. Everyone handles different situations differently. And some of the things that I notice that I see in like my college students, for example, is some students, when they get that paper test, they're so excited. I don't know why they're so excited, because I have test anxiety, which is funny because I'm the one giving the test. I'm not taking the test. I still get anxious giving out a paper test though. Some of them are like, yes, I'm so excited to fill in these answers. I've had a couple of them. You ever had those ones where they're just like so excited? They're like, oh, it's a
That's me.
test. That's you?
I love tests.
I get test anxiety for my students, if that tells you anything. But other students, they sit there and they freeze.
Yeah.
My first semester teaching here gave out the first test that I ever gave at Triton. And I was so excited because I'm like, they know all the material. I've prepared them. We've talked it over. We did a review day. They are ready. Most of that class had severe test anxiety, and I didn't know. So even though I knew they knew the stuff, most of the students, there were a lot of them that did very well, but about half the class did poorly due to this underlying test anxiety. There was even a part where like one person wrote, I remember what day you said this on. I remember that it was sunny outside. I remember that I drove after getting a Starbucks and was in a really good mood and really ready to learn, but I do not remember the answer. I was like, well, I'm glad you can specify where you were. But that is a form of trauma. And even though we're hoping that there's a lot of social emotional development that's happening in schools before they come to us at college, there's no guarantee of that. And even then, when they come back as a second career learner where they've lived their life and they're like, all right, I'm ready to start something new, or I just want to take classes. They have all those years of in between, and now there's that new anxiety of, oh, I haven't been a student in 20 years, 10 years, 5 years. There's that new fear and anxiety. So that's like different ways that students will just respond. There's the speech freezers, where you have an assignment for a speech, you have weeks, months to prepare, and they get up there, and you've seen their draft, you see it online, you see that they've submitted on Blackboard. They get up there, and it's that tightness, that freeze. It's a traumatic emotional response. There are actually 4 types of traumatic emotional responses. Does anyone by chance know them already? No. Jim, no? All right. Ooh, blue. I did not know I pressed that. We're doing blue. Sorry, I got really excited. So there's flight, fight. Does anyone know the other ones?
No.
Freeze.
Freeze. Anyone know the last one?
No. I forgot.
Fawn.
Oh, that's it.
The 4 F's of responses that you might get. Yeah.
What's fun?
Well, we'll go over the other ones first just to make sure everyone's on the same page. Because fawn is 4. Flight is they run away. They're gone. Maybe they don't even show up to class. They're out of there. Fight, they're going to fight you on everything. I did it. I made the presentation. Okay, great. You did it. Now I need you to actually finish it, right? Freeze, that I can't move, I can't do anything, I can't think. Like, it goes down to everything, like it's in their entire body. Fawn is the, I love your blue shirt. You know, like, I really like the way you designed that test. I know I didn't do so good on that test, but so it looks like kissing bottoms. So I was trying to say the other word. But it's where you go overboard and you try to either compliment or take care of the person who you feel like you're going to get a negative reaction from. This happens more frequently in abusive relationships than with, hopefully, us and our students. I'm hoping that's not the case. But that can be a response if they feel that, Laura, you look so like, sorry, your face just took me off guard for a second. But if that's ingrained in them as to how to respond to their anxiety, to their fear, and to that adrenaline that's coursing through them in that moment, they're going to do those things instead of actually be able to think clearly and be grounded in that moment with you in the classroom. So those are the 4 different types. Yeah. Any questions before I?
And these are the 4 types of traumatic emotional responses?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm sure there's other ways to label them as well. But these are the 4 that some way, shape, or form most people will categorically go into. And even if they have traumatic experiences, like with fawn, you may not see that one because that one does occur most frequently, like I said, in abusive relationships because they're trying to prevent the abuser from whatever they're about to do. Does that make sense? But it could trail in. All right. So let's switch gears a little bit into trauma-informed teaching. And I have this nice little short video to help introduce it. Hopefully it's not too loud. Volume good?
If you're fearful, if you're anxious, if you're distracted about something that's happened to you or your family, you literally can't learn. Your brain shuts down. It's essential to give kids social and emotional tools to go with their intellectual tools.
When they walk through the door, they don't leave everything that has happened at the door. They bring it with them. Operating a trauma-informed approach is the understanding that we have to be able to help them manage their experiences in productive ways.
Having that lens makes it less about are they doing the right thing or the wrong thing, and more about where is that behavior coming from, why is that happening, what can we do about that.
Schools are powerful places. That's why it's so important as educators that we don't contribute to the trauma that many of our young people experience day in and day out. It is our responsibility to ensure that schools are places of healing, places where our students can thrive.
Class now, okay?
Yeah.
We're gonna share a high and a low experience. Last week, my anxiety started coming back really bad, so I've just been learning how to cope with that.
It feels frustrating for me and I have to take a breath. Catch myself.
We just struggle a lot in my math class. When a strong relationship exists with a teacher, with a mentor, with an advisor, it actually can reverse the effects of the adverse experiences. Children are amazingly resilient if they get that opportunity for attachment, for comfort, and for problem solving with a caring adult.
Good morning, Jolene. We're glad you're here.
So I know that's a little bit more geared towards elementary, high school teachers. But when you search for a video that has trauma-informed care in college, you get the really long, boring, stuffy videos, which I didn't think would be as fun. But a lot of those things are still applicable in our higher education classrooms. Do we have a beanbag corner in the classrooms? No, right? Like that's probably not going to be a part of what we do. But how do we provide that support in a different way are some of the ways that we can start thinking about. So having this strong base, this place of security is one of the biggest things. And some of that is just through having a routine to your classroom, which I think most of us, I'm going to assume everyone does. And if you don't need to out yourself, don't worry. But having a routine, something that they know and can depend and rely on. Coming in and being like, okay, Professor Stuckemeyer always starts with a ridiculous question of the day in this class. I know how it's going to start, and I know that we're probably going to do a group project towards the end of class. It's a consistent thing that happens. Every week I do the same kind of, I do like a triangle. I call it a triangle. There's no actual like theory on this, but to provide, come on, I know I'm short.
The pen might do it better.
Haha. There's no actual like published article on how I do this, but this is how I build my structure. For example, is I think of it like a triangle, where I have my lecture, I have hands-on, and I have students lecture. And that lecture can look fluid. It doesn't always look like someone standing up in front of the class. It can be them working in groups and talking to each other about what they read over the weekend. But it's an opportunity for them to talk about what they've learned, whereas the hands-on activities are something they're doing in the classroom that is engaging, that they're writing or drawing, making posters. I get a little lucky because I teach ECE, early childhood. So that means sometimes we get to do things like paint. We get to do things like tinker. So I will say I get a little lucky in that way, but something that they can physically do. So that way I can try to get the learners who are more audio, the learners who are hands-on, and the learners who need to talk about it. But that's just kind of my way of trying to provide a structure. So if I teach one class during the week, if it's a night class, I try to hit all three of those in that night class. If it's 2 times, I try to hit between those 2 classes during the week those 3 points. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. But that's how my students know. They know that sometime during the week, okay, well, we didn't do anything hands-on on Tuesday, which means Thursday, we're probably going to do a lot of hands-on things. It's predictable. Yeah. Anyone else have any like good advice for structuring?
I'm the wrong guy to ask.
Aren't you the psychology guy?
Yeah, I'm completely unstructured in every aspect of my life. So there's no way I'm going to suddenly become structured. It's too late. Sorry.
No, it's fine. Is anyone else?
One thing I have found for creating, I think I'm creating a safe environment, is when people come late to class, I just say, hey, Jeff, how you doing?
Yeah.
And that's it. And I think it models for the rest of the class. Like, that's not what's really important that's going on right now.
Yeah.
Like being late.
Yeah. No, that's something I do as well. Because when the student walked in at the end of the video, just greeting students is a big thing. like just saying, hey, how are you doing today? Using their name, like it makes a big difference. Now I know where Akila gets it from. Thank you.
Where I keep
Just
looking.
adding on to that, I
Yeah.
also, when someone's absent,
Mhm.
I also know, oh, so-and-so's absent. Because then the students are there and go, oh, well, when I'm not here, she's gonna miss me.
Yeah, that's
I don't
good.
even know, yeah, I'll notice, she'll notice that I'm not here.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyone else do anything with their structure? Not to pick on Angela, I know she does an agenda that the students can see when they walk in.
Agenda, and then now I did do this, starting this year consistently, there's some kind of formative assessment, like quiz that's ungraded, or an article they have to read at the start of the class, and I have all of my absent, or all of my late tardy people, non-existent. There's, everybody's on time.
Because they know.
Yeah, because they know that they'll get, points docked.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it's just for completion, that's.
Yeah, I do something similar. Most of my Blackboard shells, I do a separate page for each week.
Yeah.
And at the top of the page, there is a list of the topics we need to cover. But then below that, there's an agenda, which is kind of a plan for how we're going to cover them.
Yeah.
And my agenda always starts and ends with the same thing. It starts off with Q&A over previous assignments, and it always ends with, I call it different things. Usually I call it my mission briefing for the next assignment, you know?
Yeah.
But then in between, it varies from week to week. But again, students can look at the page and they can know exactly how we're going to spend the time that day.
Yeah.
So it's similar to what Angela was saying.
So ESL's a little different, but I like to always have the agenda posted for them as well. So I've been implementing some things that we do consistently when they come in. This quarter, I'm really blessed. I have a lab, so I'm going to get up their computer skills. So they know to come in. I have the attendance sheet on a clipboard to sign in. They go to their station, turn it on, get busy, pull up Blackboard, read what we're going to be doing. Also, we always have a how are you, a get to know you, few minutes, you know, how was your day, what's new, so they can practice their conversation, continue to learn each other's names. And then I participate as well, you know, to join in so they can know their instructor.
Yeah, absolutely. Anyone else want to share? Yeah.
I teach math, which is always, not always, but many times it's the least liked subject. Especially I teach math for GED, so people always, I think, have trauma from math. You know, it's been caused by teachers.
I remember having a terrible fourth grade math teacher. I still remember her.
And it's really sad. So they need to know it. So what I like to do, and I started a couple semesters ago, is I don't call them math problems, I call them puzzles. So every time they come to class, there's a puzzle. And I try to make them, like last night there was one about donuts, so there's a box of donuts or a truck, you know, so I make it look more exciting. But then we talk about it, you know, and some people, and it just makes it like, you don't have to know this, and what did you do, and what did you get, and what answer, and they get different answers sometimes. We talk about what, yesterday somebody came up with the right answer, but it made no mathematical sense, and I'm still trying to figure it out, but I'm like, well, you know, on a test that would be good to guess the right answer, you know, but it just kind of, it starts that way, and then they know, you know, kind of eases them into what we're gonna do.
Yeah, absolutely. It provides familiarity and routine, and something that's a little bit less, and something that I like that you said was puzzles. Because language is another part of trying to help with that trauma. Because you walk into a math class, and I teach early childhood math and science. So I got the double doozy of like, a lot of people have math, a lot of people have science. I'm very lucky where most of my classes here they're actually very excited about math and science. I have one or two that are like, in high school I had a terrible math teacher, or in elementary school I remember I did not do well in science and I never recovered from that. But at the same time, the language of just calling it puzzles helps make it approachable in a different way. So office hours, one of the things that I learned last year in the CTE was someone said they call them student hours because it's for the students, and by making it student hours, it made it more approachable. So something I did after that was I stopped calling my office hours, and I started calling them student hours. It raised it by like 2 students, but that went from 0 to 2.
Right.
So that was a really high increase. Another thing is that in all my classes, they can miss, depending on how many times we meet, they can miss so many days without penalty. Students wouldn't tell me when they were gonna miss, right? They just gone. So I started calling them mental health days. I said, you can have one mental health day without your grade being penalized. But in order to take your mental health day and have an excuse absence, you have to email me and just say, I'm taking a personal day. No explanation needed. Do you know how quickly that changed my students? Like, I tried it this last semester and this semester, and it's increased the amount of times that students will tell me before they're absent. I went from maybe like 1 or 2 students to probably about 90% of my students. I have 1 or 2 who still chronically don't show up or are like, but that helped extremely in them thinking about the fact that they're like, oh, I have 1 day that I can miss, and it's okay. So that language shift helped a lot. Yeah.
There's one that I sneak in on them, which is, instead of saying you have to do this assignment by Tuesday, I say you get to do this assignment by Tuesday.
Yeah. I know, I'm starting to steal that from you. Like, because I remember you mentioning that before. You get to do this by this day. Anyone else have a fun language switch that they found helps them? So now we got puzzles over here. No, okay. Yes.
What was your, you had a term for quizzes, an alternate term.
Oh, what did I call? No. Oh gosh, I remember I had this. And now that you put me on the spot, I'm not gonna remember until like I go to bed tonight. But I will email Laura at like 3 a.m. and be like, it was this, and she'll send it to you all. But I know that I don't call them like quizzes. I call them something else.
Inquiries?
I don't remember now that I'm on the spot. See, I'm freezing. My brain just like done.
Like, I get lab instructions, I call them mission briefings, so I don't know.
There you go. Yeah, no, that's
Somewhere
perfect. Yeah, mission briefings. I love it. Yeah, it changes how they approach it, right?
Yeah.
Because then it's gone from them hearing the same terms to describe it, the terms that might have reinforced that trauma of that learning, and shifts it into, oh, this is different, this is new. And newness is something that excites our brains usually. If it's not, then there's a deeper underlying issue where you might need to talk to a counselor. But that's why Jim's other favorite word, play, thank you, is so important, because that helps bring those things forward. So I know we're adults and we're teaching adults, but one of the things is trying to find moments where they feel like they're playing while they're learning. And that helps a lot with helping to resolve a lot of those underlying trauma. So mindfulness, let's see, we've got mindfulness, language, structure, play. So those are some of the big ways that we can start to help to do it. But a thing on the part of the students is that their emotional resilience is really going to come into play with these things as to how they receive it. And emotional resilience is something that theoretically they've been working on their whole life, but again, going back to childhood, there's something called the ACEs quiz, which is, we're not going to go through it, I promise, because I don't need to know everyone's trauma. The Adverse Childhood Experiences Survey, or SCORE. Do you remember? Is it SCORE or survey?
I didn't use them.
Oh, cool.
Now we
sorry. But you check off how many things happened in your childhood that caused trauma in your life. So it's one of those ways in which students can figure out, okay, this is a way in which I was not able to build emotional resilience. I highly recommend not doing it with your students, though. Refer them to a therapist, because that's something that they can work on with them, and then work through the emotional part of that. But theoretically, when you have an emotion, you're supposed to feel the emotion, right? That's theoretically what's supposed to happen. I'm not going to pick on anyone, because I'm not going to make you share your emotions in this room. We only have 15 minutes left. That's a lot to handle, right? But theoretically, from childhood, you're taught that you're allowed to feel your emotion. The second thing from childhood is you're supposed to be able to name and label that emotion. Okay, now, what do you do with that emotion, though, right? Do you have to squish it down? Do you have to, I don't know, just live in it, hide it? No, you're supposed to be able to feel it. So the emotion manifests the beginning of the feeling, you name it, you're supposed to be able to feel it. From there, you're supposed to be able to, as a child, find support. Because as a child, sorry, we're going a little bit early childhood on you guys and early childhood development.
Good.
You're supposed to be able to have those people in your life, or at least one person who you can go to and be like, I don't know what this feeling is. And they help you untangle it, manage it, and then resolve it. And theoretically, as you get older, the support, sometimes as adults we need support, let's be honest. Like, can't tell you how many times I've gone into Angela's office and been like, I don't know what to do right now. Like, I'm stuck. We still need people, right? That's still a big thing. But theoretically, we're supposed to be able to, at some level, for at least minor emotions, be able to resolve it ourselves, go on and solve the problem. But if you don't get past just naming the emotion and being able to feel the emotion and be in the emotion, that's going to cause another log of trauma on you as well. And that's up to the students with their counselors, or us with our counselors as well, because we also have to be able to do that. And I'll be honest, it's not easy, right? Because like we're like, oh, we're adults, we're working professionals. No, you should not throw a temper tantrum in the middle of your classroom. I'm not saying that. But we are allowed to express and feel emotions. Again, short of throwing a temper tantrum in the middle of your classroom. Just saying.
Why'd you look at me when you said that?
Figured you'd take it the best.
I thought you just looked right over
No, I was trying to scan the whole room because you're in a weird spot, so I have to turn my head more deliberately towards you. So I'm trying to look at everyone. You sat in a bad spot.
That was bad. That
That was bad timing. I
was
apologize.
bad backpedaling. That was not effective.
On my part or yours. Thank you, Jim.
Thank you, Hunter.
So that's a big part of it, right? And again, that comes back to what Jim said earlier about who can handle what. So maybe, yes, they have test anxiety, but they can get over it and take the test anyway. Maybe they have nervousness about giving speeches, but they can do it anyway. They can still process that emotion and go to the solution of, I just have to do it. Like, that's all there is to it. But again, that trauma will come back if they can't go past it and they're in flight, fight, freeze, or fawn. They're stuck. So what do we do? How do we help with this? Give you a second to awkwardly sit and ponder it as if I'm really waiting for a response. I'm not.
Talk to them about it. So I've got like a sheet with an envelope of what's familiar and comfortable to us. And then what happens when we push outside the envelope? And it's like fun, but it also could be scary. It might be confusing. It could be any number of things.
Yeah.
And I talk about pushing outside the envelope, but not too far so that you get hurt and don't want to go outside the envelope again. But you know, it's a psych class, so this all falls under the heading of psychology.
Yeah. No, that's a great example too of just talking about what can you do just a little bit, right? Just talking to them, but also just being there, right? Like just showing up, just a smile and a hello. Like we talked about that a little bit earlier. That goes a long way of just being seen. Christopher Clem was talking to me before this, and he said I could share this. He said one of the things he does now is that on his first day of class, he has a little worksheet they have to work through. Half of it is a syllabus quiz where they have to go through the syllabus and find certain things. And the other part is just about them. Do they have a preferred email that they'd like him to use? And is there anything that might affect your attendance, your participation, or your assignments in this class? And he said that helps him so much just to, and also like he's gotten a lot of thank you from students because then they feel less pressure because, well, they're already experiencing something. Maybe they're going, like if they're second grade, they might be going through a divorce or a parent died or an aunt or something happens, right? Just that ability to be like, this happened in my life and I want to show up to class. I want to do these things, but I need that additional, like just grace and understanding right now. That's not always going to be the case in what's happening. But that's one of the ways that he said that he just gives them an opportunity to talk to him. He found students frequently want to share what's going on. And it changes the whole idea of like, okay, well, you have this happening, so you might miss a class. Okay, it's a class. On the flip of this, though, so even though we want to approach with empathy, providing them structure, and giving grace, something else is in that structure is still holding our objectives, still holding our standards. Because if we start letting those go down, I forgot the word for it, but we're basically, I'm gonna use the word belittling. That's not the word I want. Coddling, belittling, there's another word that is much more like, ooh, that hits it. But essentially we're telling them, you're not gonna make it anyway. This is too big for you.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
No, I can't think of the word either.
No, but you know, yes.
But like you're releasing them.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you're kind of creating agency a little bit in them, because then they're understanding that they can't just do it all.
Right.
Yeah, you keep stuffing it.
Yeah. We talked about the term learned helplessness at the fall faculty workshop. Leslie was talking about it during Angela's and I presentation. That's a form of learned helplessness is, oh, well, if I don't do it, I can, and they don't expect much of me, and they may not even hit the low bar you set them at that point. Because the bar's already lowered once, who's to say you're not gonna lower it again? But having that, oh, I'm so glad you're in class today, I missed you in class last week, or having like opportunities where they can like say like, hey, I just not gonna make it today. But still holding them to the expectation of attendance is still important. You still have to come, you still have to learn. So it's that empathy with the boundaries still. We're not there for them to walk over us because they have trauma, right? We're there to help teach them and help them learn, but in a place that is safe and where their brains can start to maybe relax a bit, to be able to take in the information that they want to learn. I heard this beautiful, and Laura has a list of resources she's going to send you guys. Sorry, I'm making sure I don't get this wrong. Dr. Mays Imad, in one of the podcasts that she's going to send you, called students' brains plastic, sorry, I don't want to get this wrong, plastic, resilient, and brilliant. Because our brains can recover. They are plastic, they are brilliant, and they are resilient. Yeah, questions before I keep talking. So I like to do that. Where did I put my papers?
Now, where's that plastic piece coming in? How does that come in?
So plasticity of the brain. So I guess I should explain that a bit. Your brain is still flexible. When you are so anxious, though, it's harder. Your brain becomes more rigid when you are in flight, fight, or freeze. And we're trying to hope to get students to be comfortable enough where their brains are moldable. Plasticity of the brain. Plastic. Does that make sense now? Mm-hmm. Sorry. Mm-hmm. I use that word, and I'm like, I'm not a neuroscientist, but
thank you.
Yeah. Here's some fun handouts. Yeah, so if you want to look over this before you talk with a buddy, what's one thing that maybe wasn't said in the session or was said in the session that you want to try in your classroom? So turn to your buddy or buddies.
Sure.
I think changing, I love what you said, changing some of the verbiage of the words. I would say changing some of the verbiage of the words to make it finding a different way to say tends to get it does, so that it doesn't.
I don't remember. It's like, I guess.
I also like the idea of changing the salaries to make them think that, hey, my time in the office is all about you.
I think maybe connect.
It's about you. It's not about me just being here because I'm here.
I wanted to go over that more, but I wasn't the time.
Oh, it's okay. I'm sure there's, yeah, I'm sure.
Conference, that's nice. Yeah. Okay.
You know, with the hybrid classes, it's always hard to get that online. So, bringing my, my. It's right. Yes. And I'm gonna call it. I think no, and I
It's a
Right, and think about students who come back to school and they haven't been to school in 10, 15 years.
Just to say, hey,
there's a lot.
I know
they are already.
But what I also do, because.
Like, oh my God, can I do
sure
this? And I
puts people on the
can
spot.
still do this. And I
So then I said, well, you can say yes. If
I do phone a friend.
Oh, okay.
You can phone a friend.
Yeah, so right after I said that, one lady did say, yes, and I said, but if she did it, she understand what we're doing, positive, negative. And it kind of let her feel like it was fun, and she had answered other things.
Could even imagine, right? No, no.
Well, my dad did 70s. I was anyway.
Why would he say introvert?
Because he never vented. He was fine, just,
Why would he do that?
yeah, small business owner.
Good for you for pressing on.
I worked for him, and he didn't want to lose his cheap.
Oh, that was probably you too.
Those are
Yeah. That was probably a big reason, yeah.
But I
You
can
didn't
only
wanna lose
just
your
say
thing.
they have that,
Because
they
they
don't
just,
know
because
that
I tend to
work,
like
do right. It's not disrespecting them, it's caring for yourself.
Right. But sometimes it's tough to go against family.
Oh, yeah.
You're
That's when you pick
front.
on.
Very nice. It's very good. Thank you so much. Very good. I
And,
learned a lot. I can take my goodies with, oh, no.
Well, I mean, we're gonna wrap
We'll
up.
leave
You wanna
these.
stay?
Oh, I'll stay, I'll
To
stay.
wrap up.
I'll stay.
I was like, you're running.
Oh, no, I'm staying.
We're gonna share now.
Oh, yeah, we have to stay.
Unexpected at the business department to go talk to them about it.
You wanna share your real fast?
Oh, yeah.
Chairman, what?
Share your one thing that you're gonna share.
Oh, two things really stuck with me. One is the trauma's ongoing. That really stuck with me. And, no,
Oh, so that's
Wait a minute. You didn't answer.
All right, so since I want to respect time, because we only have like 2 more minutes, what's the 1 or 2 things that you're going to take with you from here? Jim's leaving, so I'm going to make him share out loud now.
yeah, what was in one thing the trauma can be ongoing. Yeah, it can be ongoing. And also a brain would become less plastic in that scared zone. I always give the example of when we lose our sight, our other 4 senses become stronger. That's because our brain is rewiring itself. And that's plasticity. So as my class, how many know someone who complains too much? Every class, every semester, everyone's hand goes up. So they're building themselves a complaining brain.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah.
Anyone else?
Every class.
I need you to come and
Every
observe my
Language
mother-in-law.
shift.
Language shift.
Yeah, so I'm practice that.
Here am I now.
Yeah.
So,
Susan shared,
mother-in-law.
to use the word pass. So in other words, if the
6,
student
7.
asks for a response instead of the student saying no would be totally mortified, they can say pass. And then we'll go on to the next one.
I love that.
Yeah, I like
Nice,
that.
nice,
I like
nice.
that.
Did you have one like?
Good language, we were talking about the language, and I really like
As a
that
Roma
because,
business department,
you know, I
they talk
tell
about
my
the,
students, they can opt out of something, and I relate it to more students who are introvert, rather than being in the face, they need a little more time to process. And I always just say, well, I don't know is a fine answer, but I like the shift to just pass, because it takes out the like, well, I lack in something, or, you know, so.
I like that too. I do phone a friend in my classroom.
15.
And sometimes they'll raise their hand and be like, they want to answer, and then they freeze as soon as I call them. But you could call a friend, but how would you call a friend? Because they have to confer with their friend, and then they give an answer together.
Okay.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah,
You guys,
I say the main thing for me is realizing that trauma isn't necessarily caused by just one major event. It can be caused by an ongoing situation.
Yeah, good point.
That makes a lot of sense to me, but it kind of broadened my understanding
Yeah.
that more people can have trauma than I realize.
Yeah. Absolutely.
That was an interesting statistic that you said, like, by the time college students make it to our classrooms, they've already got at least one traumatic event. We don't, we're thinking about our agenda, here's what we're doing for the day, we don't even know what they're stepping in the door.
Exactly.
No, there's a lot of interesting statistics. Donna, did you have anything?
I was gonna say 2 things, same thing, just nice being a little bit more informed about trauma. And that we do sometimes, we just think about what our class, what we need to do, but we have to think more about what the students are coming in the door with. And I love the language shift. Thank you.
Some things I want to leave you with before we adjourn is that trauma is something that we're always going to encounter. Empathetic, but still keeping our professionalism is kind of one of the best ways that I found to hold my own boundaries while still supporting the students. Another thing is that trigger warnings. Sometimes some of us teach content, I know I teach some content where we talk about trauma because we talk about trauma-informed teaching. So we get into it, we talk about mandated reporting and what are some signs of like sexual abuse. I do tell my students before class, whenever we have these tough conversations that I think might be triggering, I'm like, I'm just letting you know that this is what we're talking about. We have to talk about this because this is the effect it has on children. We have to be educated about it. It may be hard. I'm not a counselor. I always remind them that. I'm not a counselor. But if you need someone to talk to, I'm a listening ear, but just know that there are counselors on campus at your disposal. So that's something that I try to structure in. And if I have a class that has a lot of our conversations, I'll email Leslie and be like, do you have anyone who can come talk about self-care, self-compassion, and learning how to just try to take care of ourselves and be more mindful. So yeah, those are some of the things that, just to recap on those, because those are big questions that we didn't really get. That's a whole session in of itself, I think, is trigger warnings. So Laura, next semester, trigger warnings.
Roll edge in.
Perfect. But yeah, so if you want to stay and talk for a minute, I'm more than happy to. If you're like, I gotta bounce, it's your time. I stole 2 extra minutes from you, so I owe you 2 minutes.
If you would like a cup of coffee.
Unless the coffee covers the 2 minutes.
So are you familiar with the idea of practicing paradox?
No.
The idea of practicing paradox is that it's the paradox of having a formal structure and a formal set of expectations, but then also being flexible with students and understanding that things come up and we're all coming from different places. And just a lot of what you said today kind of reminded me of the practicing paradox thing where, you set the expectation and you don't necessarily lower that bar, but you provide flexibility to students in reaching it in terms of how much support you give them, how much time you give them, or things like that. Sure.
Yeah, so I've never heard that before, but now I'm going to, my scholar brain's gonna turn on. What am I gonna do for the next several hours is look at arts and paradox.
I think most of us do it to an extent, even if we're not aware of the concept.
Right. Which I hope so anyway, because it's one of those things that it's like, I don't know, I find that I learn something from my students, and maybe that's just me. Like, I know I'm very fortunate teaching early childhood where we have, like, there are some things where we have flexibility. We only have one class where it's like, if you don't get it right, you're kind of screwed. So the other classes have some freedom and creativity. But our health, safety, nutrition class, you don't know the ECFS, which your class is going to shut down.
Do you need them right now?
So there is too.
Like on your way out.
Yeah. I'm very lucky in that. Something else that I'm having this semester is I'm having my 118 students design their own midterms. So that health and safety class, that one where they don't have a lot of flexibility, I'm having them do their own midterms. And it's surprising that they all pick different projects. Yeah. I just love that, that my students want to sign tests.
Yeah, me too. I mean, it makes sense, like, things like that, it's just like,
we want to do a project, we want to do your projects, we want to do that.
but yeah, I like to.
All right, well.
Just with the iron.
Go for it. As long as it meets my quality, it should be. We'll do it. That's the agreement. So next week, we're gonna design the midterm. Yeah, they want to do something that's hands-on, practical, and relate to what they've been learning.
Just one other teacher on the same floor.
That checks all my boxes.
I mean, it's a during break maybe, because your students are taking a break and I'm out, she's out, and so we can't, it's not like I can look down the hall and go, oh, she just left.
That one I am.
So it is kind of isolating.
You feel kind of like
It's about, you know,
Sometimes I like to.
Oh, you're welcome.
like I don't think of
But you want to
it.
like.
That's right. So thanks for having us. Nice to meet you. Nice to meet you.
I appreciate how many people came out. was in control.
It
It was, I was not anticipating this many people come for trauma. I put trauma on there, I'm like, who's gonna come to this?
Now, he wants to sleep, and I was.
Well, part of the reason why I wanted to come, well, part of I'm in the hours program and trying to fill my hours. But also, I do the mental health training this past Friday, and it seems like something that would be kind of tight. Nice synergy.
I was having but training, the video was intense. I full on, just like started falling. Like, I'm low key a cat person, because I'm not allowed to have that mentality anymore. Somehow that would be a full time.
And then it goes to gray and.
But again, I might be doing my emotional capacity in my house, so in that
I
moment.
do it like every 2 months.
Start solving your fun.
Yes, for a while.
We need pencils, thank you so much. Thank you for calling. I'll send out an email with all the links. Sure. Yeah.
So when I was getting on the registry, notice on mine, I said I'd like to do it,